Hello and welcome. We're going to discuss another very famous errant. I made this drawing from photograph of the composer Richard Wagner. Wagner translates to basically Carter in English, so it's very much a theme about a journey with this composer. Now, probably many of you are not aware that every time you step into a theatre or a cinema, there are elements in the design that you have today which are purely down to Wagner himself. Until Wagner revolutionized the opera stage, you had a situation where you would have the singers on the stage, and between them, visually, which in some ways is a distraction, would be the orchestra. So Wagner came up with the idea of the sunken orchestral pit, so the sound seems to come out of nowhere, or out of the earth as it were, and goes a long way to not destroying the illusion of what is happening in the drama on the stage. Interestingly, you'll see the opposite actually occurs in the realms of the modern day media. I don't know how many of you have noticed when you have news broadcasts that often at the bottom of the screen will be breaking news with totally different events than what is actually being talked about. So in some ways that is a distraction and the opposite of what Wagner was trying to achieve. So I've done a timeline. I don't know how well this is going to show up. And I've got some notes here, so I shall read the notes and leave you with this diagram, which I hope will make sense. I really need to perfect this and sort out the colours I used. It's basically it's actually a second draft. Anyway, Richard Wagner was born in Leipzig on the 22nd of May 1813 and died in Venice on the 13th of February 1883. Therefore, his lifespan is 69 years and about 9 months. So his life midpoint year is the year 1848, which is hugely significant. We'll come on to that a little bit later. His composing period begins in 1826, when Wagner was just 13 years old, and some of his earliest sketches and compositions dated from this year. Now, the year 1848 is hugely significant. This was at the height of the revolutionary fervour that was sweeping across Europe. I suppose culminating in the Dresden Uprising in that year, which is 54 years before the Phoenix year 1902. Now, if we go 54 years the other side of 1902, we come to a very similar event in 1956, that being the Hungarian Uprising. So both the 1848 Dresden Uprising and the Hungarian Uprising of 1956 share the same story of unrest which was crushed by the authorities in their respective time periods. 1848 is also an isometric marker in itself. The year prior to this, 1847, we find the death of the composer Felix Mendelssohn Bartholdy, whilst in 1849, 1 year after 1848, we have the death of the composer Frédéric Chopin. These two composers having very short lives of 38 and 39 years respectively. 1826 to 1828, which is basically Wagner's earliest, his beginnings of his composition period, are marked by the death of the composer Carl Maria von Weber in 1826, a contemporary of Beethoven who pioneered and championed the German opera. Up to this time, it was very much dominated by the Italians. A lot of the Mozart operas are often sung in Italian. The following year, 1827, was the death of Ludwig van Beethoven. Both Weber and Beethoven were hugely instrumental, excuse the pun, in the musical style that Wagner was going to develop as his own from these two composers. And then the following year, 1828, we have the death of Franz Schubert. Wagner is perhaps best known, and his greatest compositional output is in the operatic world. But he developed what is called the music drama rather than the opera, so you don't have the repetitive choruses and things which you get with opera. You get more of a cohesive storyline, which he further developed into what he called the total artwork, which combines all the arts, so no one art is as great a prominence as than another, and they are all given equal, can't think of the word, emphasis, as it were. So Wagner's operatic genre composing period begins in the year 1833. This year is highly significant. It is the midpoint between the two Phoenix event years of 1764 and 1902. So it's an isometric marker between those Phoenix event years. And it's interesting that Wagner lives for 69 years himself, because half of 138 is 69. It's also 1833 is the birth year of the composer Johannes Brahms. 1876 is another significant year connected with Wagner, as this was the year of the premiere of his epic music drama cycle called the Ring Cycle, the Ring der Nibelungen, which is this, where are we? This group here. Where are we? Just looking at my notes. So the Ring Cycle, this was part of a bigger vision of Wagner. Unlike many other composers, he didn't just write the music, he wrote the librettos as well, and had his very own ideas about stage directions and much, much more. But suffice to say, he achieved the impossible in his thinking big, in that he actually had his own festival theatre built in Bayreuth, which premiered the Ring Cycle in 1876. And it has pretty much been performed almost every year since, apart from 1945 to 1950. But apart from that, it has been uninterrupted. The festival theatre still exists today. Until recently, it was still in the hands of the Wagner family. I believe now it is actually owned by the German government. But don't quote me on that because I didn't sort of look into that. That's just off the top of my head. 1876 obviously is the centenary of the independence of the United States of America, and Wagner was commissioned to write a centennial march, which he duly did for that 1876 anniversary in the USA. We can group Wagner's operatic and music drama output into 4 sections. So this first section, what I'm calling the early operas, consist of Die Feen of 1833 to 34, Das Liebesverbot in 1835 to 1836, and then Rienzi 1837 to 1840. These are not sort of classed as the main Wagnerian canon, so are very rarely performed, very few recordings of them. So that brings us on to the mature operas from 1840 to 1848, which is De Vliegen Hollander, The Flying Dutchman, Tannhäuser and Lohengrin. Just checking my notes. So prior to his midlife marker year of 1848, we actually have 6 operas. But before that marker, he had actually started work on Die Meistersinger of Nuremberg. So there is one work that sort of overlaps into this earlier period and this later period, which consists of 2 further groups. So we come on to the sort of what I would call the pinnacle of Wagner's creative output, that being the Ring Cycle. Wagner began composing this 4-work epic in 1848, and this enormous undertaking would come to completion 25 years later. Wagner preserved many of the German mythologies in this cycle by fusing and weaving these folklores into a cohesive whole. The enduring success of the cycle lays in the genius of Wagner's grand vision, as much as the drama itself is deeply layered with esoteric mysticism in such a way that it has remained entirely relevant to every generation of humanity ever since, and is still performed annually at Bayreuth as well as many other places such as the Metropolitan Opera in New York, Royal Opera House in Covent Garden, and many other venues. I'm just finding my notes again. Here we are. So the Ring Cycle comprises of 4 music dramas fundamentally very different from conventional operas. These are Das Rheingold, which I've coloured in yellow on here, Die Walküre, The Valkyries, 1851 to 1856, Siegfried, between 1851 and 1871, although there is a 12-year gap in composition within the composition of Siegfried, which allowed for Tristan and Isolde and the Meistersinger to be written as well. And then finally Götterdämmerung, the Twilight of the Gods, which started the whole Ring Cycle off in 1848 and was finally completed in 1874, which is this blue section down here. The reason why there's these overlaps is because Wagner basically composed backwards, you could say. He wrote the libretto to what became The Twilight of the Gods, which was originally entitled The Death of Siegfried, to which he felt it needed a backstory, hence he came up with Siegfried, which was originally entitled The Young Siegfried, which he felt needed explanation, which created the Walküre between 1851 and 1856, and that needed a prelude with Das Rheingold. So this ring cycle starts on this midpoint year of 1848. I would regard it as the high point of an emerging Germanic golden age of art. Wagner had perfected his total artwork, where all the arts were given an equality, each art brought into a unified wholeness that has never been achieved since, nor does it ever seem that it could be surpassed, and so rightly the ring cycle can be viewed as the crowning glory of this Germanic golden age. That then brings us to what I call the late music dramas, which begin in 1845 and go right through to 1882, which consists of 3 works. They follow the same blueprint as the ring cycle, and there's a certain overlap with the composition of the ring cycle and these 3 other works. They consist of Tristan and Isolde from 1854 to 1859, Die Meistersingers von Nürnberg 1845 to 1867, and lastly Parsifal 1857 to 1882. Incidentally, Parsifal is very much associated with the Fool's Journey, and it's quite appropriate that I'm recording this on April Fool's Day, the 1st of April. So moving on. In review of these three work groupings, we find a number of thematic similarities between each trio group. So in Die Feen, Lohengrin and Parsifal, we find similarity in that all 3 are centred on the mythological and the mystical. Both Lohengrin and Parsifal reference the Holy Grail. The second group, as it were, thematically is Das Liebesverbot, which is the ban on love, Die Fliegende Holländer, the Flying Dutchman, and Tristan and Isolde. These 3 works have a theme of love triumphs over everything. And perhaps it culminates really with that famous diminished 7th, what is known as the Tristan chord. Both the Flying Dutchman and Tristan and Isolde also feature a secondary theme of ships and the sea. The third group in this thematic ordering is Rienzi, Tannhäuser and Die Meistersinger von Nürnberg, which take more of a historical basis for these 3 operas stroke dramas. Tannhäuser and Die Meistersinger share a minstrel night kind of theme as well. The other group, the ring cycle, consisting of 4 music dramas, incorporates elements of all of those 3 as well. As well as composing his own librettos and music, Wagner also wrote numerous prose works. Perhaps his 1850 essay Judentum in der Musik offers some profound insights into the way art was heading. Testimony of such is still playing out to this very day. Now, the midpoint of Wagner's composing period from 1826 to 1882, we get the year 1854. 1854 is marked by the completion of the first part of the Ring cycle with Das Rheingold, the birth of the composer Leos Janáček, and Engelbert Humperdinck, who is most famous for his opera Hansel and Gretel, and also the poet and lyricist Oscar Wilde was born in this year. Franz Schubert's Alfonso and Estrella premiered on June the 24th by Franz Liszt at Weimar, 32 years after it was composed. There's another connection between Franz Liszt and Wagner, as Franz Liszt ended up as Wagner's father-in-law. 1854 also marks the composition by Franz Liszt of his third symphonic poem Les Préludes, and also his first Years of Pilgrimage piano pieces called Année Suisse, Switzerland. Hector Berlioz composes Les Enfants du Christ, the baby Jesus in other words, and Johannes Brahms composes his piano trio number 1. Also in 1854, Robert Schumann attempts suicide by throwing himself from a bridge into the River Rhine. Interesting that 1854 you have the completion of Das Rheingold, and then Robert Schumann attempting to take his life in the River Rhine. So it's some interesting sort of parallels here. Now you may come across Judentum in der Musik, and it's rarely mentioned apart from the title, and usually in a very negative way. But I invite you to either read it or you can listen to it, as I have made audio readings, which I will put a link to, which are on the other channel. That in itself is a trilogy. So Judaism in Music was written in 1850 and caused something of a storm in what Wagner showed through his perception. That was followed by a follow-up writing some commentary on Judaism music in 1869. So that you have a 19-year period between the first and the second essay. And then there was a third one entitled Modern in 1878, 9 years after the 1869 essay. These two I have made audio recordings, so you can listen to it and judge for yourself. They are deemed, as all Wagner's prose works, as culturally significant and are free from copyright, so there is no issue with those. The other interesting thing with Wagner's Ring cycle, the way he weaves German mythology and creates a cohesive story, is not unlike what has done with what has been put together in the Bible, and effectively it is the same story and can be interpreted just as much as even the modern day Bible can be in its multiple versions, as a story of an internal journey, not something that has been carnalized and externalized. This applies very much to the Ring cycle, and also many of the other Wagner dramas, most noticeably Parsifal. There is an esoteric meaning to that. I have playlists on some of this on the second channel, so I invite you to check that out. I shall put the link to the channel on this video as well. So I'm putting Richard Wagner forward as probably even eclipsing Beethoven in terms of being an errant who went his own way, did his own thing, and his own self-belief against all odds, he achieved what most would seem to be impossible. Imagine today the cost of just having a festival theatre built. That would run into the millions, possibly the billions. But it was something Wagner managed to achieve in his lifetime. So I put Wagner forward as, I would say, the high point of German art, as much as the ultimate in Errant, and something of an inspiration, in many ways a role model that we can aspire to be like in achieving what can seem impossible goals. Now, I'm not saying do it in the way Wagner did it. He does have quite a reputation in the way he treated people, which is probably not the best. But of course, what Wagner wrote in 1850, 1869 and in 1878, shall we say, rattled a few feathers in what we could call the powers that shouldn't be. So there is always this attempt to discredit him and cast him in a poor light. But if you can move past that superficial level, there is revealed so much more to this. So that concludes my take on Wagner for you, and you may not like opera or music drama with high-pitched sopranos. I understand that. But it is certainly worth looking into the librettos, even if you don't like the music, because there is deep esoteric truths to be found which I feel will benefit you greatly. So I'm going to end this by saying unconditional love to you all. Do check out the description where you'll find a range of things that I can offer which will help empower you, to help you find your true self inside yourself. So until the next video, unconditional love to you all.